I was recently told it is inappropriate to refer to someone who takes care of their sexual and genital health and is free of sexually transmitted infections as clean. So probably that. Story 1. Went to a drag show at a bar and restaurant with some friends. The girl I was dating asked me to act less straight. She said it was supposed to be a queer safe space and that my straightness could be problematic. Story 2. The Cure is listed in the goth community as a problematic goth band for performing in blackface. What they actually did was make a music video where they painted themselves entirely black and then decorated themselves with fluorescent paint so they could dance under black light and glow. Story 3. I was told that learning about calories consumed and calories burned was problematic because weight loss science was pioneered by racists and Nazis. At the time, I was over 400 pounds and very sick. One of the suggestions I got from a very non-Nazi doctor was to lose some weight. I told my friend that if they did not have a more progressive doctor with real scientific alternatives, I was going to have to side with the Nazi doctor research this time. I was also told it was problematic for a man to not want to take care of a child that is not his. Story 4. I am a grade 8 teacher. I ran a debate unit every year until one year when we were brainstorming topics. One of the students suggested dress code. Most of my students supported the lax dress code side. I was guiding the discussion and offering ideas for arguments. I suggested the pro-dress code side argue that crop tops are not school or work appropriate and that they should have a rebuttal for that. This led to some female students complaining to administration, and I was admonished by them. I no longer run debate units. Story 5. Surfing. A girl I used to work with called surfing problematic. Either she did not know what surfing means or she did not know what problematic means. Story 6. A while ago, I saw a comment on a post about men being sexually assaulted that basically suggested caring too much about it is problematic because it draws attention away from women who were sexually assaulted. Story 7. If someone says problematic, I will ask them to explain exactly how it is problematic. It is lazy language used by people who feel vaguely uncomfortable with anything and do not want to think or feel deeply. Story 8. A controversy is what you now refer to as someone having a disagreement. Have you heard that controversy over vanilla ice cream? Story 9. Twitter and Blue Sky revisit the discussion about expecting people not to masturbate on public transit every few months. Another recurring topic is that DoorDash is considered a human right, and expecting someone to microwave a frozen chicken pot pie is viewed as ableist. Story 10. I was told that calling a lead singer of a band a woman was problematic because I did not include the fact that she is transgender. I just said woman. Story 11. I got chewed out for saying gracias instead of thank you. She said it was disrespectful to Mexicans. I grew up and went to college in New Mexico. I spent a lot of time with Mexican Americans and just picked it up the same way I picked up an accent after 18 years in Texas as an adult. Of course, that was the least of the red flags I ignored. The story with that girl is too much for most people to believe. Story 12. I have a friend who told me she thought her husband was controlling because he told her to take her health more seriously. Story 13. The Jedi named Plo Koon was upset because his name contains a slur. However, no one else interprets it that way. Story 14. Being reserved, quiet, and unsocial. I have been told interesting things just for being observant and reserved. Once, someone on a date said I must be a massive cheater because I am quiet. She said no one would know my whereabouts, and it is the easiest way to cheat. Other times, I have been told that I am complicated and hard to work with because I did not want to be around people. However, I fully participated, did my job, and just did not give extra input or engage in side conversations. Go figure. Story 15. A friend of mine caused some moderate Twitter discourse by implying that people who are financially struggling should avoid ordering food delivery services. This was apparently considered discriminatory against people with disabilities. Story 16. Fires caused by leaving phones charging overnight. The problem is not just the possibility, but that information and factors are overly generalized. Fires can definitely start if you leave your phone charging overnight, especially if your charging cable and power adapter are not compliant or of good quality, if you thermally isolate your phone, and if your phone's battery is damaged. Modern technology includes fail-safes and protocols. I know this because I have several devices. I conducted a simple survey asking friends where they got their chargers. Some bought cheap rubber charging cables from unknown online sellers. Their power adapters felt light for some reason. Their ports were unclean or damaged. Some even bent their charging cables 180 degrees just to charge. It is not charging phones that leads to fires, but technological illiteracy and using low-quality, uncertified chargers. You should avoid charging with uncertified chargers. Story 17. When a Royal Navy captain found the term man overboard problematic and decided to change it to person overboard. At the end of the day, if I fall off a ship into freezing water, shout whatever you want, just get help. Story 18. I have heard that you cannot say master controller in information technology or master bedroom in real estate because of the word master. Story 19. Pretty much any time I use a word that means the exact same thing but is not politically correct. The most recent example was someone getting upset that I said someone was homeless instead of calling them unhoused. It literally means the same thing. Do not get me started on what we are supposed to call dwarfs. First, you did not want them being called midgets, so we switched to little people. That was insulting, so we called them small people. That was insulting, so we switched to dwarf after the condition they have. Now, I do not know the term they currently use. Story 20. I commented in the movie's subreddit that I thought Ariana Grande was funny in the new Wicked movie. That was literally my first comment ever about that person. An upset Reddit user then replied, asking why I and apparently everyone else were obsessed with her and ignoring the rest of the cast. She then reported me to the Reddit Care Resources, the suicide prevention hotline, which I then flagged as false. Some action was taken, but probably not much. Story 21. Saying that you can succeed with hard work is a microaggression and should be avoided because some people work hard and do not succeed. Story 22. The majority of the liquid that comes out of meat is not blood. It is myoglobin. If your meat is not juicy, you have overcooked it. Story 23. The most ridiculous thing? As a Dungeons & Dragons player, the fantasy races Drow and Orc were labeled problematic because some people decided they were allegories of real people. The truth is, they were never intentionally created as such. Both are entirely fantasy creations designed solely as antagonists for the heroes and were never meant to reflect or comment on actual living beings. For example, no living person has the combination of jet black skin, straight white hair, red or violet eyes, and pointed ears like the Drow. Similarly, no one has green skin, overdeveloped musculature, fangs, and pointed ears like the orcs. However, some people felt these fantasy races resembled modern-day groups and injected their personal politics into the game. This led to Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast turning great antagonists into bland characters who can be good or bad because everyone is the same. Story 24. There was a little girl who had a rainbow on her birthday cake and was expelled from school because her family took a picture of her blowing out her candles outside of school, which became a problem. Story 25. I have heard people say with a straight face that it is problematic to flirt with and hook up with your friends. How did they think most romantic relationships happen? Story 26. I bought my granddaughter the exact bicycle she asked for. She literally picked it out in front of me in the store, and I purchased it. The bicycle happens to be pink and white. As soon as I assembled it, I took her to the park to try it out. A woman at the park scolded me for imposing problematic gender roles on a child. So yes. Story 27. The phrase blacklist/allow list in information technology. The phrase homeless. Man referring to our collective species and all derivatives thereof, which does not refer to man as in the gender but is shorthand for human. Story 28. I think calling something problematic does not mean drop everything. This demands immediate action. Something can be problematic and still not be a crisis. Like your example. Yeah, I can see that. Calling someone without a sexually transmitted infection clean automatically implies that having one is dirty. There are some irresponsible people with sexually transmitted infections who are gross and irresponsible. But plenty of people who are responsible and hygienic, the cleanest people you could hope to meet, can still end up with a sexually transmitted infection. So, is it problematic? Sure. Does it mean stop the presses, change all of the nomenclature around this topic right now? Now, to me, a good answer to this question would have to be something called problematic that in no way, shape, or form has any scenario or circumstance that causes any unintended connotation or consequence at all. Otherwise, if it causes any kind of problem, even a fairly minor one, we can acknowledge that and call it problematic. Story 29. Saying that some things are objectively true is considered a Western patriarchal view. I was told I was privileged to believe it, and that even 2 + 2 = 4 is not objectively true. Story 30. I find it strange when people think the older generation complimenting the younger generation is inherently creepy. I grew up with friends' grandmothers, mothers, and others all telling me I was handsome or a good-looking young man. Usually, the grandfathers and fathers would tell girls they were cute or beautiful young ladies. I am not saying it cannot be creepy, just that most of the time it is simply a polite compliment to someone they watched grow up. Story 31. There was a large number of people in this collecting community I was in who insisted the term scalper was offensive to Native Americans. Not only does this ignore the current meaning of the word, but it also ignores the historical truth that many different civilizations throughout human history have engaged in scalping. Further, I had a friend insist that redskin was offensive because it referred to natives bleeding red when being killed, as if all human beings don't have red blood. I wasn't arguing that redskin isn't offensive either, just that the reason she gave made no sense. Story 32. I talked to a friend about my weight loss success when I was interrupted by a woman who told me it is not okay to call someone healthy or normal as opposed to obese. Like in the sentence, I am obese, but I want to get down to a healthy or normal weight. Apparently, that is fatphobic, and the term obese already crosses the line. I should refer to body shapes as smaller bodies and larger bodies. I told the woman lecturing me to be quiet and asked her politely to discuss this elsewhere because I have a zero-tolerance policy for such behavior. Obesity is linked to many health problems. It is the opposite of healthy and should never be accepted as normal. Story 33. It was problematic for me to insist that my ex-girlfriend see her doctor when she was overdue for getting her intrauterine device replaced, but also wanted unprotected sex without other forms of birth control. How dare you lay claim to her body? I am not accidentally creating a child with someone who will not do basic due diligence. Story 34. I was called a misogynist for telling a girl that most diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives by companies are performative public relations stunts that do not accomplish much besides high-minded rhetoric. I was not even arguing against the ones done in good faith, just being real. Story 35. I was called a sexist caveman for saying my wife is a stay-at-home mother. I cannot remember what they said I should have said instead, but that was extreme foolishness, even for Reddit. Story 36. Someone once said I was problematic. There was no explanation why, and the best part is that we hardly interact. Story 37. Guys should not date consenting adults who are younger than they are. Some women may consider this problematic based on the man's age. Story 38. Being a virgin over 40, I am 42 years old and have found no negative effects from being a virgin at my age. No sexually transmitted diseases, no difficult ex-partners, no alimony, no worries about paternity issues, and no wasted money on relationships. It is not always easy and can be depressing sometimes, but overall, it does not bother me. Story 39. Manspreading or bag spreading. Easy to solve. Just ask the person politely if they could move their leg or bag, and it is done. Story 40. I have a problem with the word problematic. Whenever I see it in print or hear someone say it, I involuntarily roll my eyes and let out a big sigh of general discontent before once more trying to plunge my head into a wood chipper. It is a pushover, a mealy-mouthed way of saying something is messed up, but you are not brave enough to call it out. Well, perhaps I do not particularly have an issue with it, but just to be safe, maybe you should not say it because it might make people upset. I do not know anybody specifically, but somebody somewhere might not like it very much. Story 41. Almost any time I use a word that means the same thing but is not politically correct, there is an issue. A recent example was someone getting upset that I said someone was homeless instead of calling them unhoused. It is literally the same thing, Do not get me started on what we are supposed to call people with dwarfism. First, they did not want to be called midgets, so we switched to little people. That was considered insulting, so we called them small people. That was also insulting, so we switched to dwarf, based on the medical condition they have. Now, I do not know the current term being used. Story 42. Had an ex ask why I would be okay with having a gay child. I knew then and there that I had to put my foot down and end it after about 6 more months of amazing intimacy. Story 43. The reasoning with sexually transmitted infection language is because not everyone has had the choice in contracting a sexually transmitted infection. It is also because clean implies dirty for anyone who tests positive. I am not dirty because I was raped and contracted human papillomavirus. I am positive for human papillomavirus. It takes some of the stigma away from having sex and getting sick because of it. Story 44. I do not know. At this point, the pink hair topics just sort of wash over me like the adult speech in the Charlie Brown cartoons. It is like watching Fox News. If you try to make sense of it, you might harm your brain. It is better to just squint and move on. I was told I was culturally appropriating once because I wore a tunic. It is a replica of one found in a bog near where my ancestors lived. Someone I am related to probably discarded it in the bog in the first place. I was not even in public. It is just comfortable to wear around the house. I do not think those deceased people would care anyway. However, the mere appearance of doing something considered taboo, like wearing an unusual shirt, resulted in a moral scolding from a selfish person who, in hindsight, was probably unfaithful at the time. Story 45. Since you delete your posts, here is an original copy of you/Jenny_Loggins' post, if available. I was recently told it is problematic language to refer to someone who takes care of their sexual and genital health and is free of sexually transmitted infections as clean, so probably that. Story 46. I am told my existence is problematic by feminists every day in the media and online. I am supposed to stop existing. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.